Anthropic just launched Cowork, and it's essentially Claude Code but for non-developers. But Cowork is just one piece of what's been a very busy few months for Anthropic. Skills became an open standard, the Chrome extension has rolled out to all paid users, and we can actually see that there is a clear pattern emerging with where Anthropic is going. So this week, we're doing a Claude deep dive. What's new, what it means, how you might actually use it, and what is the wider play here. If you watched our last video on file management with AI, you'll know that you can ask Claude to suggest a new file structure for you and even organize your files. But it involves several steps, including getting Claude desktop app to write a Python script for you and then executing this in your command line, reserve the all-important context window and rate limits. However, as is so often in the world of AI, things have now changed dramatically within the course of just 1 week. And you now don't even have to do any of that thanks to Claude Cowork. Now it's being positioned as Claude Code but for non-developers. Now what Anthropic noticed, and I've noticed this as well, is that people were using Claude Code for all sorts of non-coding tasks. Vacation research, GTM work, building slide decks, cleaning up emails, cancelling subscriptions, even recovering wedding photos from hard drives. Now a lot of that we've covered already. So Anthropic built Cowork to bring those same agentic capabilities to everyone else. So now you don't have to be a coder. So let's talk about how it works. So you can give Claude access to a folder on your Mac, and then it can read, edit, and create files within that folder on your behalf. You can queue up multiple tasks. Claude will make a plan and work through them, keeping you updated on progress. It's a lot like how Claude Code works. The interesting detail here is that Anthropic built Cowork in about 10 days, using Claude Code itself. So we have reached the stage now where AI is building new AI tools. So don't let anyone tell you that AI is all hype. Now, I want to talk about some practical examples of what you can actually do with Cowork. So you could point it at a folder of receipts and screenshots and have it build an expense spreadsheet. You could have it reorganize your downloads folder based on content rather than arbitrary file names, and you could give it your scattered notes and have it produce a first draft of a report. One really interesting use case that I saw on LinkedIn was that it can now be used to actually manage a Google Ads campaign, to actually build you a Google Ads dashboard. What's critical here is that you're not going to get rate limited. So it works much like how Claude Code creates a plan then runs multiple sub-agents, essentially parallel versions of Claude running in tandem to carry out tasks. Now there are some caveats. First of all, it's only available on macOS for Claude Max subscribers, and that's the $100 a month tier. Anthropic says Windows support is coming, but hasn't given a timeline. And Anthropic is being quite upfront about the risks. They warn that Cowork could take destructive actions like deleting files, and there's still a concern about prompt injection attacks, where malicious instructions hidden in documents could manipulate Claude's behavior. So their advice, and I would agree with this, is to be very explicit with your instructions and to back up any folders you give Claude access to. But I do think the underlying point is clear. Anthropic wants Claude to move from being something that you chat with to something that actually does work on your behalf. Now the second piece of the puzzle to understand is skills, which Anthropic updated in December, and they've released this as an open standard. Now skills are essentially reusable instruction sets that teach Claude specific workflows. So you can think of these like brand style guidelines, email templates, task creation in Jira or Asana. It's that repetitive procedural knowledge that organizations accumulate over time. Now, I do think the way skills works is quite elegant. A skill is a folder containing a skill markdown file with instructions, plus any scripts or resources Claude might need. Claude scans the available skills and loads the relevant ones based on what you're asking it to do. So you're not stuffing everything into context at once. It's a kind of progressive disclosure based on the task at hand. Now, what's significant about the December update is that Anthropic published agent skills as an open standard. This really does follow the playbook they've used with MCP, the Model Context Protocol, which has become the de facto standard for how AI agents use tools. Skills you create for Claude can now theoretically work across other platforms that adopt the standard. Anthropic also launched a directory of partner-built skills from companies like Atlassian, Canva, Figma, Notion, Stripe, and Zapier. So you can have Claude create tasks, apply brand guidelines in Figma, or format documents according to your organization's standards. As Claude led the way with the Model Context Protocol as the standard for all AI systems. Again, they are leading the way with making Markdown the standard for AI. Claude loves Markdown, and just in the same way that Claude Code encourages you to have a Markdown file that you always refer to, with Claude Cowork and with Skills, Markdown files are instrumental. And remember, Markdown files can be very easily converted into file documents. And as we're going to talk about later, tools like Obsidian become increasingly very, very useful. So the broader point here is that we're moving beyond just prompting models to actually equipping them with domain expertise. And by making it an open standard, Anthropic is betting that the ecosystem growth benefits them more than proprietary lock-in. Now let's have a quick go at how a skill might work. Alright, so here we go. This seems to be working. So we can actually ask Claude to help us make a skill. So it's asking us some questions. What should this skill do? Tell me about the skill you'd like to create. What problems does it solve, or what tasks does it help with? What outputs or actions should it take? So you might want a skill for a specific type of document creation, work with a particular API, certain type of data. So let's say I want you to format my AI news scripts for me in a particular style. I want the Times New Roman font in size 14. When I draft a script, I want you to put it in nice paragraphs for me, nice small paragraphs for me, broken up with relevant headings in relevant H2s for every section, and I want it in a docx file. So let's see what it says. So instead of having to ask every time for it to do this, it's going to create a skill to actually be able to do this. So as we can see, it's reading the skills creator. It's asking me more questions. When you say relevant H2s for every section, do you have section names that you typically use? Introduction, main story. So yes, we'll say 1 intro and 2, okay, just different topics, or a different topping headings, or put demo and screen recording in brackets. So paragraph size, I think 2 to 3 sentences, so it's easy for me to read on the teleprompter. What should you typically say to activate this skill? For example, format this script for me, turn this into a proper news script. So we would say, okay, create a doc for this AI news content. Line spacing, I'd say let's have double spaced so it's easier to read on the teleprompter. Page margins, don't need any specific styling for the H2s. Yeah, H2s in bold, please. Okay, and in Gcore colors, in bold, please. You could say put it in Gcore colors, but I think that's not relevant. We're reading it off an auto cue, so we want it to be just in black and white. The main thing is that the spacing and everything is formatted correctly. So when I'm reading it, I actually have the text broken up for me, and I'm not having to constantly redo different takes. And if I have notes about certain things as well, and I want to go off the cuff about things, then it can do those as well. So let's press enter, see what it does. Perfect, it's now creating this skill for us, and you can see it's making a markdown file for us. And by the way, you can see that we've done this with Sonnet as well. It'd be interesting to do a comparison between looking at Haiku, Sonnet and Opus. I really don't think that you need Opus 4.5 for building a skill. So you can see this is the skill, and it's going to give you instructions on how to actually implement this, implementation notes. So you can simply copy this to your skills. You can download it and add it to your Claude skills, or you can simply press copy to your skills. So we'll do that, and voila. And now if we go to manage our skills, you can see this one is turned on, your AI news script formatter. So if we go back to the chat, and if we now go to new chat, and we'll get this week's script. So here is this week's script. We'll grab this. So we'll get this, we'll select all, we'll copy, and we'll say format this AI news script for me using the skill. I'll copy and paste it, and let's see what it does. Does it use the skill? We'll be able to see. Yep, you can see it's starting to run the skill and it's trying to understand the requirements. So it's immediately going and looking up the markdown file for us. So I guess one thing is you might ask, okay, why do we have this and why do we not have a project? Well, I think the key difference between this and a project is that this format is very, very structured. So in a project, it's kind of up to you to actually give the instructions in a Claude project or indeed in a custom GPT. This is a very structured format that Claude has been trained on. And so by going through this process, you're going to get more accurate results when you actually ask it to do this every time. And also remember, you can invoke this on new chats. You don't need a chat with a project. You can simply invoke this every time you start a new chat. You can say, okay, I want you to do this. So here we go. Let's see what it's done with this format. It looks like it has created us a docx. Look at this. It's followed all the instructions. It's in double spaces. It's in Times New Roman. It's done the heading for us. It's got skills, the skills section we've talked about, how we're talking about Claude with Obsidian and note-taking, demo of a skill. Very, very good. This is in a much better format for the teleprompter than just having a whole bunch of text. So there you have it. Great demo, I think, of Claude skills. Now let's talk about something a little bit more practical, connecting Claude to your notes. If you use Obsidian or any Markdown-based note-taking system, you can connect it to Claude using MCP. There are several MCP servers available. MCP-Obsidian is one of the most popular ones, and that lets Claude read, search, and write to your vault. I personally use Bear Notes. I just feel this is a little bit more intuitive for me. I love the graphical interface, but I have used Obsidian before, and the founder has been pretty vocal on social media about its usefulness for Claude. And this is where we see why Markdown really matters, because your notes are essentially context, and the more relevant context Claude has, the better outputs it will be, and all of your previous notes can become the basis for a Claude project or a Claude skill, as we've just seen. Now, this setup does require a bit of technical configuration. You do need to set up MCP servers, which of course involves editing a JSON config file, but it is a piece of cake once it's up and running. It is quite seamless. This isn't limited to Obsidian. Any folder or Markdown file works in this way. The point is then that Markdown is a format that Claude handles well, and if your knowledge base is in Markdown, you can make it accessible to Claude with relatively little friction. And with Cowork now available, you could take this further. You could give Cowork access to your notes folder and have it reorganize the files, generate summaries, create an index based on content patterns. The third piece of the puzzle is Claude in Chrome, which rolled out to paid subscribers. Now this is Anthropic's browser agent, so you install the Chrome extension and Claude can now see what's on your screen and take actions in your browser on your behalf. So there are practical applications, things like summarizing long articles, filling out repetitive forms, managing your calendar invites, stepping through multi-step workflows across different websites. Now of course, we've covered agentic browsers before. Perplexity has Comet, and OpenAI of course brought one out as well. But many big enterprises have actually put restrictions on it. They're worried about malicious prompt injection. There's also integration with Claude Code, so developers can run Chrome from the terminal and have Claude interact with their browser. It's useful for testing, debugging, and automating browser-based tasks. Now, Anthropic has put a lot of work into the security side of this. They've implemented site-level permissions, where you choose which domains Claude can access, and high-risk actions like publishing, purchasing, or sharing personal data do require explicit confirmation. And they block Claude from accessing certain categories of sites entirely: financial services, adult content, and so on. They've also been transparent about the remaining risks, and prompt injection, of course, this is where malicious instructions hidden in web pages manipulate Claude's behavior, is a real concern with any browser agent. Now, Anthropic says they've reduced attack success rate significantly, but of course this is an ongoing area of development and it isn't a solved problem. It would be wrong to suggest that. But the browser is clearly becoming a battleground for AI companies, as we've seen. The question is whether users want a dedicated AI browser or prefer AI embedded into their existing browser. Anthropic is betting on the later. So let's take a step back then. What's the picture that emerges here? What's going on? Well, Anthropic seems to be building Claude specifically for work. The standard tools for work at enterprise is of course Microsoft Copilot because of its integration with the Microsoft suite of tools. But if you look at how Claude compares to ChatGPT, a few things do stand out. Anthropic is the only one of the big players not to have either a video or an image model. Most new features they bring out are about making Claude better for work. work and enterprise use cases, skills, file management, and these developer tools. Anthropic's own research found that engineers use Claude in 60% of their work and that they see a 50% productivity boost. So where does this leave us? Well, Anthropic is building what looks to me like a unified work environment. We've got Claude Code for developers, Cowork for non-technical people, and a Chrome extension for browser tasks. We've got skills for institutional knowledge, and then we've got MCPs for connecting to your tools and data. Now, whether this wins against ChatGPT's broader ecosystem or Google's integration with their workspace and of course with YouTube as well remains to be seen. But if your use case is work focused, so writing, coding, document analysis, research, I think that Claude is worth very serious consideration. And there's a reason why the big players in the productivity enterprise space like Salesforce are turning towards Claude for their latest tools and bots. The key question to consider, I think, is whether Anthropic can maintain their lead on capabilities whilst also making their tools accessible to non-technical users. Cowork, I think, is their best bet to date at doing that. Let me know in the comments then, what are you using Claude for? Do you have any really interesting use cases you'd like to share that maybe we can cover in a future video? And have you tried any of these new features? Now, as always, subbing to the channel helps us grow and gives us the ability to make even better content. As ever, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.